Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, hello. Welcome to the Money and You show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. So happy you're here. I have a fantastic guest today. I can't wait to introduce her to you. And she is going to help us uncover some of the deeper emotional things that may have happened and how to work through those so that you can live your best life. And you know, living a limit-free life, I spend a lot of time on mindset and your relationship with money, for example. We also spend a lot of time on practical things, strategies and tactics and ways to get new jobs and ways to build your business and ways to, build wealth. But the actual bottom line is that without doing some of the personal work, the personal development work and spiritual work, whatever it might be for you, you have to have that as a foundation to be able to do all these other things. I was just listening to another podcast, a woman that I had recently on the show, and she was talking about how she's done about 250 shows. And the majority of the guests come on and at some point talk about things like exercise or meditation or mindset. And she's like, it's a business show, and yet everyone is talking about this. And so we have to remember that as successful professionals and entrepreneurs, this is the stuff that we have to understand and work on in order to really flourish and be our authentic selves and do well in whatever path we've chosen to take. So with that, I'm going to introduce Sammy Sadicario, who guides trauma survivors to write their stories and forgive themselves so they can breathe more easily, feel lighter, and live happier. Before her obsession with all things self-development, self-love, story work, and mindset, she was on track to a career in the entertainment industry. She spent her days auditioning for Broadway, writing shows, and producing short films. After years of seeking external validation in work and relationships, high stress, low immunity, and constant injury, she found her true passion for healthy mindset and life coaching. Now, when she's not coaching her fabulous clients to a strong sense of self-worth and flourishing identity, she can be found rock climbing and camping outside and throughout the Pacific Northwest in her Honda Element. Sammy, welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks so much for having me, Michelle. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this is great. I'm so excited to talk to you. And I just want to dive right in and have you tell us, because your background's intriguing as I read in the bio, but why don't you share a little more about how you got to this place?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you read, I have a background in the performing arts industry. And if you know anything about the industry, which I'm sure you do, you are put in a box from day one. You are just told, this is who you are and this is who you'll be. And that's that. And that's how I lived my life for many years, being, acting as, behaving as, thinking like the person that everyone else told me I was. And I did this when I started my business. Okay, I need to be a weight loss coach. I need to go in this route because this is what people tell me I'm doing. So this is what I'm going to do. And this is what everyone else is doing. And because I lived my life that way and really put my trust into other people rather than myself, for example, the word gut instinct meant nothing to me for many years. I would literally say, I don't understand what that means. What is a gut instinct? I found myself in a relationship with a narcissist. And while I was in that relationship with the narcissist, I was also going through this certification where I learned all about how we tell ourselves these stories and all about how we can shift our stories and use proper breathing, using breath work, as well as writing techniques, which we'll talk about a bit later, to move through those stories and move through those traumas, big T traumas, little T traumas. And so while I was moving through this relationship, I was learning this modality that has now flourished into this thought confidence process that I now use with myself and with my clients. And about 4 or 5 months after leaving that relationship and using these tools that I had to lift myself back up and think for myself again after gaslighting, I realized that all of my clients had also either been in that kind of relationship or were leaving it. And I realized, okay, this is my calling. These are the people I meant to seek out, people who have given away their power for so long and are ready to listen to their own voices in their head again. And it's interesting. I just want to touch on what you said at the beginning of this already. What you said around building our business, it first starts with self-development. And it's so true. I had to go really deep and do a lot of work in order to start talking about this publicly and in order to show up in the leadership role that I wanted to be, that I was meant to be, for my business, for the people who I'm serving, and for myself, really.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I want to talk more about trauma and gaslighting because I do think not everybody is clear, even in their own lives, what that is. So I think people hear that, and we all know certain types of trauma. Obviously, if you've been, victimized in a crime, or if there's so many things that we can easily say, okay, that would lead to trauma, but what are some of the more subtle things that can create trauma in our lives and impact us deeply that we might dismiss or not pay attention to? I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, great question, Michelle. And I'm going to first start with big T traumas and little T traumas, right? A trauma is a distressing experience. So big T trauma could be a death in the family, could be an assault of some sort, could be complex trauma, like a relationship, an abusive relationship, emotionally or domestic violence. So those are big T traumas, and a lot can fall under that category. And your question is kind of more about the little T traumas. Mm-hmm. What are the small things throughout the day that we're giving our nervous system that hit? And that's the way I like to think about it. What is something that either made us feel devalued, diminished, put us in a cycle of anxiety and self-doubt and rumination? Times when one thing that I talk about all the time is like times when somebody told you you're not good enough, times when somebody told you you're not enough, times when somebody put you down. Those are the little T traumas that really add up, particularly when we're talking about inner child healing, when we're talking about going back to our childhood and facing those little T and big T traumas of our childhood. So often when we're moving through the world and we're triggered by something, and we have that road rage, or we find ourselves having a panic attack because somebody brought something up for us. Those are we are revisiting those big T traumas and little T traumas. So although we might say to ourselves, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, nothing really, it's not like I was assaulted in ABC, we almost diminish what happened. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's still showing up in our lives today in some way, shape, or form. So step one is building awareness around what those ruminations are, around what those triggers are, and where did they come from, is first learning your story to then change your story. So that's the way I like to look at big T traumas and little T traumas. And then there's also the subject of gaslighting, which is separate, but still together.
Yeah, I really want to hear your take on that. I just want to comment on what you were saying because, I think it's important, especially, as for entrepreneurs, there's such a growth journey for any career journey. It's just such a journey of self-discovery and, up-leveling and growing and learning and all of these things. And we do a lot of judging. And when we're judging our own, little T traumas, as you're saying, that's so counterproductive. It's not productive is what it is. And so it's important, I think, to be conscious of these things, conscious of everything, really. But I think it's really important to be conscious of what you're telling yourself about these experiences that you've had. So, thank you for telling me that, or telling the audience that people dismiss these things, because I think they routinely do and probably aren't even conscious of the way they're dismissing it. So, yeah.
I love
great.
what you just said about what we're telling ourselves, right? What are we telling ourselves? Do we even know that? And then who originally told us that? Where does that come from? Or did we watch someone else tell that to themselves? Like, did you watch your mom tell herself that her body was not good enough? Did you watch your dad tell himself that men needed to act in a certain way? Where did you learn this, right? And that's it. That knowledge, that first step of self-awareness holds the key to so much in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. I also loved what you were talking about. I've been doing a lot of reading lately too. It's so funny how these things come up, right? It's so much synchronicity here, but just how we create our identity to be who we think we want to be or need to be for the external world. And so it's very much of an external identity versus an authentic identity, and where we're really understanding and feeling our own feelings and not trying to be that other person that we think we should be. And it's come up in a lot of the reading I've been doing, how much you can do that for a while, and maybe you did that in your entertainment career, and then all of a sudden you just hit this point, oftentimes in, a little later in life, maybe midlife or sometimes earlier, but where all of a sudden that gap between, who you're trying to be and who you really are just makes you miserable. And so I think it's important for people to understand that too. And I know a lot of your work must be touching on that. So with that, I'll let you go back to gaslighting.
Well, that was so well said. This all started for me with identity work.
Oh, great. I'd love to hear more about that.
I became, a few years back, I became obsessed with the holistic psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPera, doing her future self journaling. I was doing it like 4 or 5 years ago. I remember I was in a performance job, and I was working on a boat for a while, singing on a boat. And I just did that every single morning. And it was the first time that it was my relationship to chronic pain and how I identified as someone with chronic pain. So I started reframing that. And that was my intro to the mindset shift world, was reframing this chronic pain and how I identified as somebody with fibromyalgia, or I identified as somebody who was sick. And I changed that identity from from a sick person to a healthy person. And then my behaviors matched that identity.
So interesting. Can you elaborate a little on how you changed your identity in that way? Because I can hear people thinking, well, I can't do that. I still feel bad. I still feel pain, so how do you just change your identity when you're still feeling pain?
Oh gosh, this is the most exciting conversation. I love that it was different from the conversation that we originally wanted to start in here.
I'm sorry.
I love that.
Yes.
There's a lot of different methods for this identity shift process. I started, like I said, with future self journaling. I started with saying, okay, who is this person that I want to be? What are the beliefs? What are the actions? How do I want to show up as that person today? And I started by writing that. And that was great. And trying to implement it. And now the problem is, as I started to live in this world a bit more, experiment with self-development and with identity shifting a bit more, is it's really difficult to step into that new person when we're still believing those old thoughts and behaviors and those traumas from that old person. So that's where I tend to get a little frustrated with like the affirmation world that we're in. And I use affirmations every day, but we can't just, and negation acknowledging we can't put in a new wiring and assume that that's just going to work if we don't believe it yet. First, we need to figure out why we don't believe that and start there. And then we can implement the rewiring. And this is where that thought confidence process all begins, is in the turning down the dial on the old identity, is breathing through that old identity and letting that person go and shifting from that old person to the new person, rather than creating a new person out of thin air and saying, I'm going to jump to this.
Well, I want to get back to, because you have a 4-step process for creating thought confidence, and I'm super
Mm-hmm.
interested in what that is. So I do absolutely want to talk about that next, but let's go back to gaslighting so you can,
Mm-hmm.
explain that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll give a foundation to thought confidence with talking about gaslighting. So, gaslighting is when someone invalidates your reality in one way or another. Now, there's more insidious forms of gaslighting, which are often purposeful from a narcissist. That's typically the gaslighting that we discuss in modern culture is this malicious form, which
Mm,
is um, the gaslighter makes the victimized feel like they're crazy by
yeah.
thoughts and actions not matching. And not thoughts, words and actions not matching, essentially. But it all gaslighting comes from an early 1900s play called Gaslight, I believe. I think
Huh.
that's the and it basically a husband makes his wife feel crazy by doing things like changing the way the lights are working and saying nothing's happening. And she
Mm,
believes her, stops trusting herself. And the reason why talking about gaslighting is so important, it's because when we are victimized by gaslighting, we stop trusting ourselves. We ignore everything our body is telling us, and we begin to rely on other people to create our reality for us. And this is where the dark path of losing ourself begins.
mm,
And so that's thought confidence is, I call it the antidote to the gaslighting poison, because when we know ourselves and trust ourselves so well, we are impenetrable to
mhm,
gaslighting. We are able to sort through that and say, you know what, that's not mine, that's yours, and I'm going to take my own power back. And this is a practice. It's a difficult practice, especially when you spend years self-abandoning.
yeah.
um, and it's, I was just writing some content about this morning. Like, we do gaslight ourselves, especially when we say things like, oh, my trauma's not that bad because I wasn't ABC.
Mm,
For years I was like, oh, my childhood wasn't that, I had a great childhood. What business do I have doing childhood healing? And that's by gaslighting myself in that way, invalidating the struggles that I had, which did exist.
right,
Then,
right.
even though my parents did a wonderful job, and I thank
Yeah.
them all the time for the wonderful job they did, um, by invalidating our reality, we are not giving ourselves the service that we deserve in order to heal
Hmm.
and in order to move forward and be the best versions of ourselves possible. Um,
Right.
and that's where thought confidence comes in.
Okay, I want to jump right in there, and I sort of want to say, as a parent myself, to the parents out there, as parents, we do the best we can. That doesn't mean that we're not going to, at some points, say and do things that actually are rather traumatizing to our kids. And it's hard for us. We're coming from our own minds and our own, beliefs and habits. And so sometimes we wouldn't anticipate that something we might say would even have that effect. But so it's not about being a bad or a good parent. It's basically what you know and don't know, and how evolved you are, and how you communicate. There's so much to it. So I don't think there can be an expectation that, you can completely avoid this as a parent entirely. I mean, and as you say,
Yeah.
I had a great childhood too. I have absolutely lovely parents, but there were still those
Mm-hmm.
moments. So,
We all have that unhealed trauma,
mm-hmm.
and this self-development normalcy is new, right? Like, people talk all the time about how mental illness, mental health is not is still stigmatized,
Yeah.
and that's true. So, I surround myself with people who eat, breathe, sleep, love in self-development,
Yeah.
right? That's definitely the community that I foster. um and I think that there is a consensus, especially around what we're seeing in the world right now, is we do need this up leveling of self
Mm-hmm.
in order to reach a broader up leveling, in order to reach a broader healing.
Mm-hmm.
So, while I like, and this is a generalization, so take that with a grain of salt, right? I'm a millennial, and raised by boomers, and generally boomers are at least just starting this self-development process, or it was not encouraged as young adults when beginning parenthood. So I really truly, I see all of these people and I see all of these new parents being committed to doing their own self-development to be the best parents that they can be, because they knew my parents did their best, but they didn't have the tools that they needed to love themselves and to heal their own triggers. So here we are. And that's where, this is a perfect time to say it. My podcast that I'm coming out with, the Reparenting Revolution, we are all individuals reparenting ourselves in order to create a better earth, in order to create a better world.
Yeah, that's great. We need a podcast called Reparenting Revolution. That's wonderful. That's great. So, okay, let's go back to the 4-step process for creating thought confidence. And I love that you have the word confidence in there. I mean, what's the meaning of the word in that context?
Yeah, thought confidence. The meaning of the word confidence, that's a great question. No one's asked me that question before. When I looked at the process that I had with my clients and I said, what is it that I'm really doing here with this modality that I use? I realized that what we're moving towards is authentic confidence rather than this fake it till you make it idea that's constantly being put into the world, if you will. We're building this internal belief that it will be okay, and the ability to be okay with whatever it is that comes. Anxiety is a fear of the future or of the past, right? It's a rumination. It's a fear, a worry. So by building this thought confidence, we can become so clear in who we are and what we believe, and our ability to handle whatever comes our way.
Oh, I love that. Okay, thank you. So, all right. So the 4 steps.
Yes. Okay. So the first step, as I said earlier, it's building awareness, right? So at this point in time, some people may or may not know the thoughts that are going through their minds. If you're journaling, chances are you're at least a few steps in. If you've been through therapy, chances are you're a few steps in. Where I differ from therapy is I'm going to get you to write that down. We work. So when I'm working, thought confidence can be built on your own, and I'm working on building something so that people can go through it on their own. But when I'm working one-on-one or even in a group setting, I teach lots of workshops with this, right? The first step is building that awareness. What are the limiting beliefs? What are those degrading and devaluing thoughts that are going through your mind? What are those big T traumas, little T traumas that you're still playing out and that you're still living in fear with? What are those things that are causing stress in your day-to-day? So first, we're going to write those down. We're going to get them all on paper. That is building awareness, step 1. Step 2 is we're going to turn down the noise. And this is where we start using your nervous system as part of it. So you've written it out, and then I get my clients to breathe it out of their bodies. By breathing with a parasympathetic activating breath, you're getting into your rest and digest mode. So as you know, we've got fight, flight, or freeze, right? As our trauma responses. So the key to releasing the fight or flight is our breath, is getting in touch with that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest. So I get my clients into their parasympathetic nervous system while thinking about and reading out loud their trauma or their limiting belief. And that turns down the noise. It takes the edge off. By the time you've read it out loud, sometimes it takes 2 to 3 times. I see a complete difference in my client's body language, in the way that they breathe. We do somatic check-ins throughout the process. So I'll have somebody say to me, wow, this is the first time I'm able to think about it without crying. I went through years. I was in therapy for a very long time, and when I finally found this modality, I was like, why didn't somebody have me Write this down and breathe before. It's so simple.
Yeah.
So that's step 2, turn down the noise. Step 3, this is where those affirmations come in. This is where we rewire. We build new patterns. And so we create that identity. Who is it that you want to step into? What are the behaviors of that person? What are the actions of that person? What are the beliefs? What are the things that they believe about themselves? What's the music that they listen to them to get them off the floor? What is the, how do they talk to themselves when they fall down, right? Like, who's your corner man? Who's your hype man? And coming up with 1% better action to implement this week to become that person. So rather than, all right, I'm official, like I'm breaking the all or nothing pattern, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of go-getters are breaking that all or nothing pattern. So rather than doing that all or nothing pattern, how can we make it just that 1% better shift? And that is how that long-term identity shift sticks, rather than this is the new me. It's how can I go on a walk with the new me? How can I get to know that new me and slowly integrate? Which brings us to step 4, which is integrate, learning how to bring that new version into the now. And we do this, and we do all of these processes, all of these steps that I do with my clients, we're writing throughout it. So we're getting that kinesthetic awareness through both writing, reading out loud, and breath. And we obviously, with accountability, integrate that new identity into the daily life and are able to take that 4th step, integrate, also accounts for times when you're triggered, also accounts from times when a new trauma comes up. How do I continue to move forward or give myself permission to take a step back when new things come up?
Oh, I love that. And you know, it sounds simple, but it's not easy to do these things. And I'm such a fan of writing. I mean, whether it's, writing your vision and your why and your goals, and I just love what writing will do for you. And so I love that you start there. I love the breath work. That is, just so powerful. All of it is just, I mean, I can just see the person's process as they do what you just described and how they'll, come out on the other end. And I do, as much as I think people, me included, try to do these things on our own, I do think accountability in something like this is really important because, like you say, new things are going to happen, things that are confusing are going to happen, and without somebody there sort of guiding them through that, it's easy to either give up or, decide this doesn't work or whatever, and our lives just get in the way, So this is a process that you need to stick to, and you need to work on, and it doesn't happen overnight. So. I love that. I think that sounds absolutely beautiful and very effective.
Thank you. I mean, it was the process that I realized that I had already put myself through, and I had coaches, I had leaders along the way. And while I was learning from them, I was also implementing the tools that were working for me. And I do agree around the accountability thing. I mean, especially when we've spent so many years self-abandoning and so many years ignoring ourselves, that is a practice of having somebody remind you to listen to yourself. So often my job as a coach, people want me to give them the answers, and I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm going to ask you the questions. Ask more questions.
And don't you love when, I mean, initially that might be annoying to somebody when they want an answer, but ultimately when they, have that insight or that light bulb goes off, you can see it in there, how good it feels to have discovered it for themselves, because that's powerful too. And knowing you can even ask yourself the questions after a point and get the answers without anybody. So that's what you can get to. But I do think that you need somebody like you along the way. I think about that a lot because, as a coach as well, it's like, can you put such an amazing program together that they never need you, that they can just read it and watch the videos and do the work and boom. And for some people, obviously they can, but I think for the majority of people, when you work with clients one-on-one or in groups, you realize the things that just come up that really need to be talked through or worked through or the right questions asked and to get them through. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And how often people don't even realize the words that they're saying.
That's right.
A lot of the part of thought confidence process, the tools that we use is language shifting. So guiding people to realize like you're using projection language or using language words that keep them in victim mentality and teaching about words that put them in the thought confidence position.
Right.
And so often people don't even realize that they're saying those words. Last week, and I catch myself all the time. Like last week I said, I really just like put myself down with my language, and my friend just looks at me and I went, oh man, I did it, didn't I?
Yeah.
So it's really important having that person reflect back to us what we just said, what we're thinking, and how that. And once you build those tools, you can begin to do it for yourself, but it does take practice and time and really putting in the reps, right?
Right, exactly. It is very much like exercise or anything that you do that takes time to get, we're such creatures of habit. And so we really, to break some of these habits, it's not easy. Even when you fall back, if you're in touch with what you're trying to do, you can reverse it pretty quickly, but like you just did. But you have to get to that point even. So yeah, really, really interesting. And can you tell us a little about how you used thought confidence to thrive after your own complex trauma?
Yeah. Gosh, I used thought confidence while it was happening. And that was the key for me. People ask me how I'm doing so well after such an intense, complex trauma. And I really do believe it's because I was practicing this stuff while it was happening. And so I was able to quickly, I was already on the journey to creating mental fortitude. So when I left, became my everything was, how do I feel better? What can I do to feel better? What can I do to think better for myself and love myself more? Because I just sacrificed a lot for somebody who did not deserve my love. How can I love myself more? So the key for it, like I said, so we write out those words. And I just did a Get the Gaslighter Out of Your Head workshop, which I'm going to launch another version of that. And the biggest thing that we did was, write down those demeaning statements, write down those abusive, devaluing statements, and then use this, what I call story shifting. So changing that language in order to come to a place of empowerment. For example, I always need to write it down in order to get it in my head. For example, something like, you can't think for yourself. Or even should statements. Should statements are so relatable, right? You should do this, or you should clean your room. You should leave your partner even.
Right.
They're pressure statements. They're things that I immediately just got pressure in my chest. My throat started to close up a little bit. My stomach began to have butterflies, all the signs of anxiety. I was giving myself anxiety by saying, you should leave your partner. That just totally just got stuck in my throat, right? Replacing should with other words that offer more freedom. So this is where we get to thought freedom and thought confidence. So you should leave your partner. Change should to could. You could leave your partner. And how much more freedom does that thought take?
Right.
And you can take it one step further and say you can leave your partner. And give yourself that permission. And then from there, write permission slips. I can do this. I can leave my partner next week. I can leave my partner today. I can leave my partner if I want to. I can stay with my partner. I could stay with my partner. Right. So using this story shifting, using this, I call it like one word games, should, could, can, to give yourself more permission. And from there, check in with your body and see what comes next and decide what's next. And you'll know, because as you start to listen to your body more and start to pay more attention to that felt sense, your body will tell you. This is where that gut instinct starts to develop, right? So I used this while I was to sort through what was happening. I was writing out all of my stories. I was writing down the things that he would say to me and the things that I would say to myself. I was gaslighting myself as well. And using this one word process to give myself permission to leave, to give myself permission to stand up for myself, to give myself permission to cry, to grieve. And it gave me the strength. I remember when I went in there and I left, the things that I had repeated to myself, the things that I had written down with those can statements, mine was I choose me. I just repeated that over and over again while I got my stuff and left. And when I left, the things that were playing in my head, replaying in my head, I was able to use this process to turn down the noise and begin to rewire for the affirmations that I wanted to incorporate. One of which, for example, and this is the beauty of the simplicity, right? I miss him. That was one. I miss him. And right now I'm checking with my body, what's around that. Same, like that tightness in my chest just comes right up. And taking out the him, taking out the projection and putting in a reflection, me. I miss me. I miss me. I miss me. I miss me more. I miss me more because I am worth it. I miss me more because it is time to put myself first. I can put myself first. And it's by learning these and all of those things that I just did in my head that quickly. We literally write out all of those steps. So this is where you take those tools and you implement them. And this is what we do over time. And that kept me away, and that kept me with the no contact. I still use this when triggers come up, because if you know anybody here listening who's been in a trauma bond, you know that it takes a very long time for that to completely dissipate, and that's okay. Now you can have the tools to continue to work through it.
Wow. My head is spinning. I wish we had another hour, but we have like 5 minutes. And I keep thinking about, the show is Money and You, and we haven't mentioned the word money, but so many of these thoughts and how we, the things we say to ourselves around money are just really awful. And, I can't ever earn more than, X amount. I'll never have money because my family never had money. I'll never, I can't save, I can't invest, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then all the shoulds. I mean, money has so many shoulds around it, and how just constricted you feel when you say, oh, I should save versus I could save. I mean, it's so much, just the feeling is so much lighter, and there's such possibility on one end and such complete, whatever the opposite of possibility, you're just completely shut down. So I find this to be something that, applied to money it would just be a huge, huge release and something that people would really need to eliminate all their money limits. Have you worked with people around money on this?
Yeah, I've used this work for virtually every subject. I personally very much enjoy talking about gaslighting the most with it. In order to, we talk about niching down, right? However, I've done this work around money. I was a starving artist for years, right? I had a lot of money stories to kill around what I was capable of. And what I've found and what I'm continuing to find, because I'm 27 years old and have a lot of money stories I'm still working through, how much lighter you feel when your worth is not defined by how much money you're making, and how much more fun making money can be.
Right.
At that level.
Yeah.
How much fun can you have with that? money, I say to myself every morning, money flows effortlessly to and away from me.
Oh, I
And
love
that's so much more fun than, I'm spending too much money.
that. Oh my gosh. I've had so many money conversations on this show lately with millennials. And I mean, you're on the younger end, but I am just loving the way you all think. And it's just so much healthier than my generation. And yeah, I love that. I love what you just said. I can't say anything better than what you just said. And I think it's so important to have fun with money. It doesn't have to be this huge, heavy weight on your shoulders that is just going to dictate your life, which I look back now because I have been paying attention to the different generations. And, for the baby boomer generation, it dictated what they did for a living, how they lived, and so much of everything. And of course, money's real, and the need for money is real. But how you think about it and those thoughts that you tell yourself around money are just key to enjoying your life and making money. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so interesting. I have just loved this conversation. I think it's so important for people to pay attention to their identity and their thoughts and all of this. And the fact that you can remake your identity is a pretty huge concept that not everybody is tuned into. So
it's cool stuff. Have you read the book Psycho-Cybernetics? It's a great place to start with all of this.
That's a great one. I'm not as familiar with it, but I'm in the middle. I'm a little obsessed right now, actually, with Dr. Joe Dispenza. So I don't know if you've read any of his.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway,
so cool.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel like, sometimes you feel like you've read everybody and then you hear like 5 names you've never heard. So anyway, I had heard his, but I hadn't actually read. So I love this conversation. How can people engage in this process that you have?
Yes, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is at Sammy Says Dance. I'm always putting out information, education, and telling you about my new programs. And if you know that you need to dive into thought confidence now, I offer a one-on-one 20-minute thought freedom call. And this is the only way to apply and see if you qualify for my one-on-one coaching. So if you're interested in that, first it's that qualifying process by that one-on-one thought freedom call, and we'll dig in, see what limiting beliefs are flowing through you, what thoughts are already flowing through you, and see where you want to be and how this process can really lift you up.
Oh, that's great. Well, I do think that people should take advantage of that, because that is, in 20 minutes talking to you, I feel sure that people will have some great insights into some of what you're talking about here. So that's fantastic. So Sammy Says Dance on Instagram?
Yes. Instagram, Sammy Says Dance. And if they're in my link in bio, you can apply for the call. And I also give that to you for the show notes.
Okay. Thank you. That's so great. Well, thank you so much. And you also are living a very limit-free life. We didn't really get into that, but you're on the road, you're doing the hobbies that you love, including rock climbing. And, you're kind of a nomad, you said, at the moment. So very exciting.
I'm a nomad. Yeah.
Yeah. So you really are living, in a very authentic and limit-free way. So I commend you on that. That's really an accomplishment in itself. So
thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
It's quite the journey.
Yeah, that's great. Well, keep letting us know how it's going. I'll be following you too. And thank you so much for being here. And I really appreciate this. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I hope to talk again soon.
Yes, me too. Okay, well, thank you. And audience, thank you for being here. We love having you. Please join us on all the podcast platforms. You can find the show. And I would love if you will subscribe and give us a review. That really helps us to continue to have wonderful guests on the show. And you can find the show on video on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel as well. Love it if you'd subscribe there too. So you can reach me at Michelle, 2 L's, at limitfreelife.com, or there are many ways to reach me. You can go to limitfreelife.com and find that and do a complimentary strategy call with me as well if you're interested in career change, business growth, money mindset, any of those areas that you might be struggling in right now. So I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what's interesting to you right now, so that we can do some shows around that. So please keep up with the podcast. This we air every Monday night at ubngo.com, and then goes to all the other podcast places. So thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week.